Joining me now on the phone, fresh off of Brady Hoke's press conference, off of that win against Indiana, getting set for Northwestern, Drew Sharp of the Detroit Free Press. How are you, Drew?
Rich, how are you doing today?
Tell me, how's everything on my alma mater campus? Bumming? Are they? It's like a funeral.
Well, yeah, it is. There's a funereal tone to these pressers every Monday with Brady Hoke. And he was asked, he did not want to talk about the change in AD after Saturday's game. He wanted that moment to be strictly about the players getting a much sought-after victory. But he was besieged with questions this afternoon regarding the interim AD, Jim Hackett, in place, and whether or not he met him. And he said that he talked with him briefly after the game Saturday, but that's been it. But Hope was adamant that, he says he can't worry about his job status. He's not fair to his players, and that's what you expect him to say. But even he has to admit in those private moments when it's just himself and his own thoughts that, the AD who hired me is gone. So the team is in bad shape right now. So the odds of him surviving, even if they were to win the last 3 games, and that includes a victory at Ohio State, even if that were to happen, I think the odds are very unlikely that he will remain as Michigan's head coach beyond the season.
Yeah, Drew Sharp of the Detroit Free Press joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. And Drew, you said moving forward that Michigan needs to lose its arrogance. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that, Drew?
Well, as someone who was, like you, a Michigan alum, who grew up a big Michigan fan back in the 70s and 80s, this was a football program that was very comfortable back in an era where they didn't have to worry about competition. And they could always they figured they could solve every problem by simply waving a magic wand and saying, this is Michigan. That will make it all better because we are Michigan. And that really hasn't worked in the last 10 years. It's not going to work in the future. They have to come to grips with the fact that college football at the highest level is far more competitive now. There's a lot more money being spread around to all of these programs, enabling them the opportunity to build good facilities and hire good coaching staffs. Simply saying that because we're Michigan and we're entitled to have good football because they won more games than anyone else in college football history is that sign of arrogance that they have to get rid of and just admit they're no different than a lot of other programs in the country right now. And as soon as they realize that and understand that it's more important not getting a quote-unquote Michigan man, but getting the best fit at AD and football so this team can try to return to some degree of relevance.
Well, I mean, and you know Brady Hoke, and I've met him on many occasions. The last thing I would call him is arrogant. I know he says, we're Michigan for God's sakes, and
that's the arrogance, though, Rich. That's the arrogance right there. We're Michigan. That's just to say we are entitled to have good football because we're Michigan for God's sake, as he says. That's part of the arrogance. And people, the fans of this program for years, have bought into that, thinking that it's a birthright for them to have good football. That hasn't been the case for years. And until they realize that they got to work for it as hard as everyone else, until they realize that, they're going to still have problems.
Well, to me, again, that might just be Hoke being just trying to, buck up the team and certainly folks like me saying that he understands the tradition based certainly on his predecessor who didn't, even though he is doing much better in Arizona. But if I had to put a finger on it, Drew, let's talk about this. Let's get real here. That Coach Hoke's biggest mistake is not having a quarterback to put his current quarterback at wide receiver where he belongs on the football field. That if there was somebody that he recruited, Shane Morris was his guy, and Morris is not the guy. I mean, there's just no question about it. That right now, just like everything else, it's a quarterback-driven sport. Gardner's been making an absurd amount of mistakes from that position, not getting any better, and that might be eventually Coach Hoke's undoing. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Rich, I wrote that at the end of last season, that if Brady was smart, he would put Devin Gardner back at wide receiver and start to find out what he had in Shane Morris. Shane Morris was the foundation of that tremendously high nationally ranked recruiting class he had a couple of years ago. Let's see what he can do. But, Rich, I'm hearing from people now close to the program, Morris just isn't any good.
Well, I mean, I think they found that out, but that's why he couldn't go to him.
And this is part of the problem. Like you said, if you can't develop a quarterback, you're in big time trouble. But you have to, first of all, identify the guys you think can be good quarterbacks. Hoke has failed in that regard. He has failed in trying to develop good players at quarterback and other positions on the field. That's another area where he's failed.
Drew Sharp of the Detroit Free Press joining me here on the phone, a fellow Michigan alum like me. So what do you think happens moving forward? Timeline it for me, Drew.
Well, they have Jim Hackett, the interim AD, in place, and it was a smart move to get rid of the AD first because it is important that you find the right candidate. Now, there are a lot of rumors out there. There are reports that Jim Phillips from Northwestern has been contacted. First and foremost, they have to find an AD who is comfortable living in the shadows. That was Dave Brandon's biggest flaw. He wanted the cameras and the microphones in front of him. He wanted to be the face of football and basketball. You simply cannot have an AD doing that. So that's the first priority, finding AD who knows, who's comfortable, that I don't have to be the face. You do that, and then you do a hard target search to try and find the best head coaching fit. It doesn't have to be someone with Michigan ties. It doesn't have to be, although a lot of the Michigan people are saying, well, now with Brandon gone, this opens the door for Jim Harbaugh. And you probably know this as well as I do with your NFL connections. The NFL people I've talked with, Rich, recently have been saying that, look, Jim is an NFL guy.
Yeah.
He may not be at San Francisco, but there are going to be other opportunities for him in the NFL.
Well,
that will take precedence before Michigan.
For him to come, Drew, you'd have to make him Michigan would have to pay him more than Nick Saban. I don't even see that happening. I don't see Michigan.
They have to make him one of the regents, as long as the AD, one of the regents.
Oh, no.
They have to do a bunch of stuff. Michigan has the money. There's no question. They could pay him $8 million if they wanted to. I don't think Michigan wants to do that because then that would be, in Michigan's mind, admitting that we do not occupy this higher plane of college athletics. We're just like Alabama and Ohio State. That we're paid to try and win games, and Michigan still has trouble balancing its need for still maintaining a high ethical standard with the realities of modern college football.
Drew, the Lions coming off a bye at 6-2. Before I let you go, I want to hit this team, which is flat out in the NFC mix, not just the NFC North mix, but they're home for Miami, at Arizona, at New England, their next three. What do you think about the second half of the Lions season, them coming off the bye, what it looks like?
Rich, who would have ever thought that we'd be looking at, in another week, perhaps the Detroit Lions against the Arizona Cardinals, fighting for the best record in the NFC after week 9 or week 10. It just shows you that this is what makes NFL a great sport. You talk about parity and all this, that it's given the opportunity for these teams that have been the dregs of the NFL for years, the opportunity, if they make the right moves, the right the coaching and right personnel, they can get the opportunity if everything falls into place. And the Lions have been a very fortunate team. There's no question about that. But, this is a better defensive team than what I've seen here in the last 15 years. And that has helped them overcome the fact that they've had a lot of injuries on offense. Calvin is probably going to be playing Sunday against the Dolphins, but they're a fundamentally sounder team, and it starts with Jim Caldwell, the head coach.
Drew, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. We'll chat down the line.
All right. Take care, Rich.
You bet. That's Drew Sharp.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.